The share of intermodal transport has been growing substantially in the last couple of years and will keep growing in the next couple of years. Ampomah will follow and support that trend by investing in intermodal railcars and additional equipment for the industry. The future of rail freight is driven by digitization. It will bring more safety, more performance. Digitization will help us to improve transport visibility. It will enable us to improve the turnaround time, trigger condition-based maintenance and predictive maintenance. Considering the EU Green Deal targets, rail freight has a card to play and Ampomah will support our industry. With more than 3,000 intermodal railcars in our fleet, we will be well over 5,000 intermodal railcars in the next 3 years. And we'll keep investing into that segment in order to provide safer and more reliable supply chain for our customers.
Urban rail's power transportation and development of a city. Today, ICT is the driving force behind the growth of urban rail transit that offers safer mobility, more efficient operations, and improved services. Huawei is currently the only solution provider in the transportation industry that can both integrate new ICT such as cloud, AI, IoT, big data, ICP, video and GIS technologies, as well as streamlined clouds, pipes, and devices. Huawei is continuously promoting wider ICT application in the industry. Huawei's Urban Rail Cloud solution provides a platform to support metro services. It represents a solid foundation for our innovation while ensuring secure and efficient operations. Centralized management increases resource utilization by 40% and simplifies O&M. As such, we can invest more resources and energy into service innovation, allowing Hohhot Metro to achieve the best management quality. We are striving to build Hohhot Metro into a digital benchmark for the industry. The Urban Rail Cloud for Hohhot Metro supports production businesses, as well as internal and external services. Each service has specific requirements, for example, needing different levels of resource security. Therefore, implementation can be challenging. During project delivery processes, such as design, verification, and implementation, we held multiple on-site meetings for industry experts to discuss and refine the solutions. We also performed strict testing on a test platform established by Horinger, ensuring stable and compliant services on the cloud platform. The process showcased Huawei's leading technical capabilities in urban rail cloud delivery, positioning the project as a reference point for other such projects in the industry. In 2013, Zhengzhou Metro and Huawei started building the world's first LTE-based urban rail line. Since then, joint efforts in metro digitalization have been made by the two parties. On May 20th, 2019, Zhengzhou Metro opened Line 5 and simultaneously launched the AFC Network Control Center. Based on Huawei's Urban Rail Cloud, the ANCC works in sync with the Zhengzhou LV Chongtong bus cards and all-in-one cards issued by the Ministry of Transport. Passengers enjoy a convenient travel experience by scanning QR codes to enter and exit metro station. At the same time, Huawei's solution provides robust capacity for expansion and upgrade. In the future, Zhengzhou Metro plans on expanding to 21 metro lines with the capacity to serve 18 million passengers and 45 million transactions. Huawei's Urban Rail Cloud solution centrally manages computing, network storage, and security on the NOCC cloud platform, increasing resource utilization by 30%. The solution leverages virtualization technologies to merge multiple physical networks into one. It also reduces the number of devices and facilitates more efficient O&M. The NOCC cloud platform converges service data and provides platform support for smart metro service application. On May 20th, 2019, Shenzhen Metro and Huawei launched the world's first 5G fixed-point video backhaul project. Now, it takes only 150 seconds to download all the train data. Before, it would have taken at least 1 hour. Huawei's solution increases the data transmission rate from 4 megabits per second to 1.5 gigabits per second. The wireless train-to-ground data transfer relies only on resumable transfer and does not require manual intervention. This has expanded data analysis capability and offered infinite possibilities for image analysis. Huawei's Urban Rail Cloud solution integrates cloud, big data, video, 5G, and other ICT to build a secure, efficient, and innovative cloud platform on the multi-rail line network, facilitating the co-construction of smart urban rails. Huawei has carried out joint innovation with leading design institutes and integrators, and set up a digital urban rail ecosystem lab. To date, Huawei has done interconnection verification tests with over 40 integrators in the industry. Huawei has also participated in the formulation of urban rail informatization standards, led by CAMET, and led multiple teams in the standardization of urban rail clouds in China. In the future, Huawei will continue to enable smart urban rail and work with partners to accelerate its development. Smart urban rail, growing with the cloud.
Based in Brussels since 1992, Unife is the association representing the European rail supply industry. We effectively promote the interests of companies that design, manufacture, and maintain all aspects of rail transport systems. In industrial facilities across Europe, Unife members are involved in a diverse set of activities. From the development and production of trains, metros, trams, and locomotives, as well as components of rolling stock to rail signaling, energy, and infrastructure equipment. The European rail supply industry employs approximately 400,000 individuals across the EU. With absolute sales of 47 billion euro, we are the global leader for rail equipment. As an innovative industry, investing significantly in research and development and digitalization, and fully involved in the shift-to-rail joint undertaking, European rail suppliers have developed some of the most important innovations in the sector, including the European Rail Traffic Management System, driverless metro systems, and the modern very high-speed train. These innovations have reduced travel times and traffic congestion and boosted mobility all over the world in an environmentally friendly way. Unife is the platform for the industry and advocates for policies that will help grow rail transport and boost world competitiveness of the European rail supply industry. At an EU level, this means securing funds for rail projects, including research and development, and pushing for better access for European companies globally. Contributing to the effort to create a single European railway area, Unife provides its members with a direct channel to the EU Agency for Railways, as well as standardization organizations such as ISO and Sensenelec, in order to simplify the rail system and promote European standards abroad. Furthermore, Unife plays an active role in collaborative European rail research, coordinating EU research projects for the development of the next-generation rail system. Unife's activities will continue to promote a political, regulatory, and financial framework that will benefit European rail suppliers, their customers, as well as freight forwarders and passengers.
Drag them in, Marie.
每个城市都有自己的故事。लेकिन ये बस एक कहानी नहीं है। हर मोड़ और हर क्लिक के बाद नए दौर शुरू होंगे। मैं उसका हिस्सा बनना चाहता हूँ।
A world of opportunities where technology is increasing our ability to shape the future every day. And with a strong focus on sustainability, we want to lead the way in our industry by creating smart and sustainable urban environments. Our cities grow, infrastructure is transforming, everything becomes connected. That's why at Kern, we use the power of technology to create value-adding services for sustainable success with our customers.
On meistä kiinni, miten kaupungit kehittyvät.
We are curious. We collaborate. And together, we create the best people flow experience.
Podemos hacer que nuestras ciudades sean lugares más inteligentes y más sostenibles en los que vivir. Haga suyo ese propósito y no estará solo.
More than 60,000 Kone professionals, serving 500,000 customers. Over 4 billion people living in urban areas. One mission: to improve the flow of urban life.
हम मिलकर दुनिया में बदलाव ला सकते हैं। ये है हमारी कहानी।
This is our story.
这是您的故事。
Bienvenue sur Spin-Up Stations, l'application intelligente et internationale pour optimiser la performance climatique et financière de votre gare. Spin-Up vous permet d'évaluer de façon intégrée les performances sécuritaires, managériales, énergétiques et environnementales de votre gare. Prenez place et bienvenue à bord. Pour débuter votre auto-évaluation, cliquez sur le bouton plus en bas à gauche de l'écran qui permet d'ajouter une nouvelle gare. Entrez le nom de la gare concernée ainsi que son adresse. De quel type de gare s'agit-il ? Une gare de bus ? De métro ? Disons qu'ici, il s'agit d'une gare de train. Une fois votre nouvelle gare introduite, vous pouvez déjà commencer à compléter votre évaluation. Démarrez en répondant au questionnaire général. Ces questions concernent et impactent l'ensemble de la gare. Désormais, il s'agit de reconstituer la gare élément par élément et niveau par niveau, aussi précisément que possible afin de bénéficier des résultats et recommandations les plus proches de vos performances réelles. À la clé, vous recevez le résultat des performances visualisées en spider charts, par géographie, par élément de géographie et niveau d'intervention. Ces données vous permettent de calculer le coût de la défaillance et le budget nécessaire à la remédiation. Les recommandations générales qui vous permettent d'adapter la performance de la gare.
So, after that little short publicity from our sponsors, or one of our sponsors, we move into our next session. And in fact, this is our first roundtable, our first panel discussion, entitled Digital Game Changers in the Next 5 Years. And we've got a mixture of people on stage, as you can see, but also online. And the moderator for this session is Anson Jack, who is an Emeritus Professor at the University of Birmingham in the UK, who hopefully is listening and is about to pop up on the screen. So, Anson, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Simon. Can everyone hear me? Excellent. Well, good morning, everyone. And I'm not going to waste too much time introducing our speakers because we're running a little bit late, and like all good train companies, we need to make up that time. So without further ado, I will introduce our first speaker, who is Christian Kern, whose most notable achievement is the former Chancellor of Austria, but has also been Chief Executive of OBB. The theme of today is digital game changers in the next 5 years. And I would like to hand over to Christian and invite him to make his presentation. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Anson, for the kind introduction. You have mentioned that the most notable achievement in my life is becoming the Chancellor of Austria, but I can tell you the most fun I had with my achievements was running a railway company, which is still on top of my memories. No, thank you very much. So just to give you a brief introduction what I'm doing right now, because I know many of the colleagues from my time in Austrian Railways. By the way, I've been also the chairman of CR, and I have been serving as a deputy chairman of the European chapter of UIC, which I really appreciated, learned a lot of people and to know, and was really a great time. What we're doing right now is we are building ESG companies and investing in ESG companies. Most of them are located in the field of mobility, no surprise, and energy, because that's my second background. And so what I have an overview, sorry for exaggerating a little bit, about how politics works, about how big corporates are working, and about the startup world. And I think it's really fascinating to think about how we can bring them together. And if you're talking about the future perspectives of railways, I think it makes a lot of sense to elaborate a little bit on what's going on in our society, what's going on in business. And for sure, we are living in transformative times, and this won't stop at the gates of the rail industry. Technology is changing business and society, and COVID has just acted as an accelerator of technological advance. First to mention is the bunch of inventions with transformative potential. Among them, the success of the messenger RNA technique and of bespoke antibody treatments shows how science continues to empower medicine, for example. Humans are increasingly able to bend biology to their will, whether that is to treat disease, edit genes, or to grow meat in a lab. Artificial intelligence in various other sectors, so this is important also for railways, shows an impressive progress in a range of contexts. A program created by DeepMind, a subsidiary of Alphabet, as you know, has shown an astonishing ability to predict the shapes of proteins. DeepMind has taken 5 years to solve what traditional science has failed at for 50 years. The secret are not less than the secret blueprint of human cells. Another reason for being optimistic, and which is also shaping the rail industry, is a booming investment in technology. In 2020, for example, America's private sector spent first time more on computers, software, and R&D than on buildings and industrial equipment. Governments are keen to give more cash to scientists, and having shrunk for years, public R&D spending across the 24 OECD countries began to grow again in real terms 2017. Investors' enthusiasm for technology now extends to medical diagnostics, logistics, biotechnology, and semiconductors, and such is the market's optimism about electric vehicles that made Elon Musk to the world's richest man. In parallel, we have seen a rapid adoption of new technologies triggered by the COVID pandemic. It is not just that workers have taken to video conferencing and consumers to e-commerce and streaming services. The pandemic has also accelerated the adoption of digital payments, telemedicine, and industrial automation, for example. It has been a reminder that adversity often forces societies to advance. These trends are also influencing the rail sector. Artificial intelligence, additive manufacturing, cloud or edge computing, microelectronics, and new energy technologies are creating new opportunities, particularly through the combination of different technologies such as the RNA vaccine or protein folding, which have achieved a breakthrough thanks to powerful AI instruments. The increase of R&D activities and the rapid adoption of new technologies by the customers are also characteristics of railways' daily business. I'm serving also as a member of the board of directors of Russian Railways, and I would like to take the company as an example because they are pretty advanced in their digitalization strategies. In the first half of 2021, more than 90% of the freight clients have interacted automated and electronically with RCT. The online cargo trading platform has been soaring. The number of clients, external service partners, and wagon loads grew by double-digit rates in the first half. And today, almost 70% of the passenger tickets are sold online, which again is a significant leap forward, taking into account that RCT is operating also a large number of regional trains. COVID has set in motion a dynamic that cannot be reversed, neither for the railways nor for the rest of the economy. The second issue I'd like to touch is the development from a hardware business to a more and more software-driven business. The railroad is the symbol of industrial age, as we know, and an industry built on heavy metal and tangible assets. As with all other industries, the railroad is now being turned into a data-driven business model. In doing so, it is following the automotive industry a decade behind. Software will become massively more important than hardware. Customer service, efficiency, reliability, and profitability will all depend on the ability to establish and deploy new software systems. This represents an enormous challenge and will change the railroads and rail technology companies on many levels, from recruitment to business logic. In the future, the number of recruited train drivers and dispatchers will decrease, and the number of developers, analysts, and AI experts will increase massively. It's the biggest change since the invention of the contact wire in our industry. Managing the associated cultural and technological change is at the same time one of the greatest and by no means easy challenges. It is about successfully integrating the hardware and the software perspectives. The third important driver I'd like to stress is climate change and the Green Deal, which are giving tailwinds for the rail industry. Numerous governments have announced major rail expansion programs. Never before has so much public money been involved in rolling stock and infrastructure. At the same time, the sector is becoming increasingly attractive for private investments. This is true for the operator business and to an even greater extent for rail technology. This enormous trust from politicians, investors, and the citizens of Europe represents an obligation for rail operators. Investing more money in yesterday's structures will not bring the desired success. The modernization of the railroads through the Green Deal must go hand in hand with significant increases in productivity and more satisfied customers. Digitization provides essential tools for this. The right prioritization and implementation of the measure is crucial. If we look at the average life cycle costs of rail companies, we see that, for example, in regional transport in Germany, for example, the maintenance costs are piling up to 35% of the overall costs, and it's one of the largest blocks in addition to personnel costs. This is an enormous cost-saving potential for a successful digitization strategy. Although this topic has already been recognized and has been on the agenda for several years, development here is only just beginning, especially when it comes to existing fleets and tracks. The fourth issue is that data-driven business models are increasingly leading us into a platform economy. The more data is available, the more reliably and efficiently the models function. Rail still has some catching up to do here. The railroad does not suffer from a lack of data. The challenge is more to recognize meaningful patterns from the multitude of possible inputs and to derive instructions for action. In order to make significant progress in this area, cooperation is needed that spans value-added stages and regions. Infrastructure companies, operators, OEMs must work together transparently. In the past, this has definitely not been one of the railroad's strengths. On the one hand, the complex national legacies, and on the other hand, the not invented here syndrome have prevented this in the past. Ideally, what is needed is a uniform cross-border industry platform that uses a uniform language and uniform standards as the platform for the future developments on the system on which all participants in the ecosystem can build. The fifth development, which is an important driver, concerns the consolidation pressure that digitization is exerting on rail technology companies. The multitude of new requirements, the enormous investments, the limited human resource pool for which the companies are fighting with the entire other economy, and the complexity of the change pose enormous challenges for the technology providers. Even established and highly respected market players have not been able to accomplish this task, as seen in the Bombardier example. The timely completion of orders failed several times due to the integration of the desired control technology and ETCS logic. Ultimately, the company failed because it was unable to make the transition from a hardware company to a software-driven company. I assume that this will not remain an isolated case for the railroad operators. This constitutes a significant problem because their suppliers are not only becoming larger, more potent, and more efficient, but the field of suppliers is being massively reduced. The concentration process is only just beginning, and this has nothing to do with the market entry, for example, of CRRC from China. They are just the scapegoat of the lobbyists having a single-digit market or share at the most, but even more, the market concentration has to do with the ability to solve complex software issues. The sixth and last driver I'd like to stress is cybersecurity. Because cyber will become a key competence and appears beside strategy as the #1 priority on the agenda of the top management. As explained, rail companies are demanding more data-driven functionality in their operations. The linkages between IT and OT layers are at the same time growing. The consequence is an increased vulnerability, higher complexity to secure the interoperability and the service continuity. This widens the attack surface and exposes critical assets to malicious activities. In recent years, for example, the number of cyber attacks on railroads has increased by more than 170%. Every 30 days, an attack is registered against critical railroad systems. Railway companies need to upgrade massively to withstand the threat that's widely seen, and this requires a new form of cooperation between rail companies and technology companies. The most interesting developments often take place at startups, which bring a completely different way of working than classic railroads. Today, around 25% of global cyber investments go to Israeli companies. You might know that. It is a trend that's also emerging in the rail sector. Alstom, for example, recently acquired a stake in Silas, which we appreciate because we are a shareholder as well, which is the leading Israeli rail cyber company. Alstom has thus taken another major step towards seamless integration of hardware and software, which confirms once again the central thesis of my presentation that the rail industry has arrived in the software age. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much indeed, Christian. And I'm not sure whether you'll be able to hear the audience showing their appreciation, but thank you very much indeed.
Thanks.
Without further ado, we'll move on to Mr. Carlo Borghini, who is Executive Director of Shift to Rail. And I think Carlo is sitting with you in the auditorium. So I'll hand over to you and the people controlling the slides. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good morning. I'm happy to be here this morning, and I think there is some presentation available. Thank you very much to the President of UIC and François Daven for having invited Europe's Rail to be here today. We have the 100-year anniversary starting, and we have a newborn, because effectively today Europe's Rail started with the publication of the official journal of the European Union of the necessary legal basic act. And many of you have been working with us in the last, I think, 2 years. Philippe, I think we had the meetings and here 2 years ago to start to discuss about it. So I think thank you very much for all of you for this. It's a newborn, but it's a newborn that is built around the work we have done together as a sector in Shift to Rail. And I was thinking that by 2031, 2.2 billion euros of research and innovation activity will be invested in rail. It's a quite an impressive amount of money. It's a quite impressive amount of work that is there. In order to provide a framework, because the title of the session is quite ambitious, which are the digital changes that we want to, the breakthrough that we want to look. I would like to go back one step and to say, to look at what is effectively the type of innovation we want to realize, because I think this is really the concept. At the end, we should go back to Schumpeter, because he talked about creative destruction, meaning the process that is a continuous mutation of the industrialization processes that revolutionize the, I would say, economic ecosystem, the structure, from within, destroying the old one and creating a new one. And I think Mr. Kern before referred to Elon Musk. And if you look what Elon Musk has done with SpaceX, with many other things, I think exactly it is this type of thinking, I'd say the creative destruction, but also he went on and we went to the disruptive innovation. So to take opportunity that are made available in the market to take new added value. I don't go in the details about what the Europe's Rail framework is, because Walter Goetz, the head of cabinet of Commissioner Vălean, has already presented it more than clearly. But the work that we'll be doing in research innovation in Europe's Rail is fundamentally to decarbonize and contribute to decarbonize the mobility transport system. If we contribute, as been said this morning, 0.4% to the carbon footprint, but your market share is 7% for passenger and 17% for freight, the contribution is not so big. So rail has really the opportunity today to change its concept of operation, system approach, and I think this is really the innovation, is to rethink how we can operate rail, making and taking advantage of the full package of digitalization and automation that are coming from different type of technologies. This is what is going on, and this will be the major scope of the Europe's Rail activities. And effectively, it will be around this concept. We need to focus, at the center you can see it, is optimized operation. Because if we want to double the traffic for high-speed passenger services and for the rail cargo, we have the opportunity to increase the lines, and we will have to do this. We need to build new lines. We have the opportunity to enhance some lines, but 2030 is today. It's really a short-term deadline. If we want to achieve this, we need to think about how making use and taking advantage of the digitalization of the rail system and the automation of the operations, we can increase the overall performance of the rail system. This is the scope and the key area of Europe's rail. But clearly, it doesn't come alone. It should come with assets, sustainability. It comes with all the other elements that are here, like the new services. François spoke about it also before. So, and I think this is really the objective we want to achieve. And how we want to achieve this, we have 5 areas where I think new innovation will be really key. The first one, introducing a European traffic management layer, meaning how to operate a European network as a network. And this will require to combine together information data systems existing at national level in a manner that we are capable to operate in a dynamically possible way the rail system and manage capacity. The second is really introducing the automation in the rail operation. We don't know yet which is the solution. We don't know if it's automated train operation. We don't know if it's automatic train operation. We don't know if it's remotely piloted trains. But most probably the real answer is that one of the key game changers will be the distribution of intelligence that today is concentrating at the center level, including on the vehicles. And this will be changing completely the way the rail will be operated. And this it will allow to understand how to maximize the performance, how the vehicle can maximize its own performance as part of an overall network supervised central level. The base for this is already existing, and we need to accelerate the deployment. It's the ERTMS radio-based. We need to introduce technology on which the 5G technology, the FMCS that on which UIC is working, the localization satellite, moving block, virtual coupling, all these are technologies. But the overall concept is really to look at how we want to see the rail operated. It's not sufficient simply to digitalize the system. Is to rethink the way operations are done. The third, we have heard before also from Mr. Kern, the cost of the maintenance of the assets. And this requires to look at the sustainable assets, looking at an approach, was mentioned also before by the colleague of SNCF, on the circular economy approach. How we are able, because the moment in which we build something, we use cement, we create CO2. So in all the components, in all the aspects we are intervening, including on rail, we need to greener rail. And don't forget, we are using large part of electricity in our system. We are already the greenest, but we do use a lot of energy. So more we are able to improve our performance in terms of traction, in terms of absorption of energy, better we will contribute to the decarbonization and the impact of climate change. And clearly, introduction, where is not possible, the priority remains electricity, by electrification, but if it's not possible, introducing hydrogen or introducing batteries or combined solutions will be a transition to the future. But not to forget, our first clear objective is to increase the market share. If today we double the number of passengers on rail, the road will not perceive it. It's a matter of fact, it's number. If you double the cargo on rail, considering the growth that will be by 2030, it will not be perceived. So we have really a major opportunity if we are doing the due diligence in this area. And we have 2 specific areas where we believe that digitalization automation will make a major change. The first is rail cargo. There, the opportunity is immense. From the digital automatic coupler, that is, we have for which we are working and enable the European Duct Delivery Program, to the digital control of the brakes, to the condition-based maintenance, to the monitoring of the fleets. All this technology will be intervening on the rail cargo, but it's not sufficient. Once again, also there, we need to keep a system approach on the full rail cargo towards seamless operations. Because if we introduce all the technology, but the train stops 6 hours at the border, we will not have improvements. So we need to have a full integrated system approach. It's not only technology, the real innovation will come if we introduce the system approach. And I will go back also on this, on the concept of Europe's rail we are bringing forward. The fifth area of actions is the regional line or secondary lines. Because when we talk about high-speed network, when we talk about rail cargo, most probably we talk about the core network. We talk about connecting long distances or cross-border. But we have millions of people that every day in Europe have cross-border operations, or are commuters, or need to move. We heard before from the colleague of SNCF, 90% of the population in France is 10 kilometers away from a station. How we can bring these people on the train is that we offer different services. And there we are looking at regional lines as an opportunity to create a new system approach in terms of vehicle, in terms of traffic and management control system, and in terms of hybridization of the solutions. Clearly, also this can be an opportunity to offer new complete services to the passenger. But the real innovation comes, I think, and François mentioned before, from what we try to build up together with the Commission and the sector in the future governance of Europe's rail. And this is what you see here on the left-hand side, the system pillar. Why is it so important? Because the system pillar is moving the focus from the research and innovation as such, but integrating such a focus on the full life cycle, starting from together as a sector at European Union level, not bringing only together operators, but operator, infrastructure manager, the supply industry, the scientific community, to define how the system has to be operated. I go back to the beginning, is the logic of the creative distractions. Is the logic of, from inside, be able to think of how this system should look like in the future. Because this will give the real opportunity. And this will give really the possibility to create the major transformation. Clearly, the innovation pillar, so the second pillar of the integrated program, will be essential because there we will have the resources, the engine to create, to design, to think about the technologies that we need to implement to achieve such system. Has been already explained before by Mr. Kern, I don't go there again, artificial intelligence, machine learning, most probably quantum computing once will come. We are collaborating with the HPC joint undertaking, high computing facility to solve complex problems, for example, traffic management. All these elements will be designed and looked at in the innovation pillar. And finally, once again, if we want to have impact, because we are using public money, so we need to give it back to the society, we need to ensure the coordinated deployment. It's not sufficient to think how the system will look like. The real innovation will not be sufficient to think about how we create new things or we evolve the things. We need to be sure that whatever is created, the innovation is deployed in a coordinated and consistent manner. If a member state of the European Union decide to deploy one solution and the neighboring countries don't do it, at the end we create barriers. We don't create a network. So this new logic that is embedded in Europe's rail, in the new partnership, goes beyond the research innovation specific activities, having a full life cycle approach from the concept of operation up to the deployment. This, I think, is really the innovation we need to introduce in rail and bring back to rail. And making use of digitalization and automation as key enabler will help to deliver this. And this also is not sufficient. There are a lot of systems into which we need to work, from the exoskeleton for the workers that spend their time to maintain the catenary line, from the people that are controlling the brakes, the digital automatic coupler, people that are coupling today the trains and do 3 times the tour of the Earth in a year. So all these type of things are elements that we need to look at, but the mission, the focus should be on such type of vision that also François mentioned before. So I believe
Carlo, I know you need to get away at 11 o'clock, so can I encourage you to...
Yes, I will wrap up, thank you.
To a conclusion.
And finally, I go back to I think you have seen this slide also for shift to rail, but fundamentally, we want to achieve a major capacity increase. We want to offer the services to the people to be on the train, improving reliability, and doing this, as Walter Goes said before, to increase the mobility and connectivity of people, offering a sustainable mode of transport that is rail and is today available. whatever we are thinking about, we have a mode of transport. We need to leverage the strength of this mode of transport, introducing innovation in order to make it the real backbone of the future mobility and transport in Europe. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Carlo. And thank you for your time. And we hope to be able to get back to you for a quick question at the end. But without further ado, I will move on to Mr. Sylvain Haon, who's the Senior Director Strategy at the UITP, and I think is on the platform as well. So over to you, Sylvain.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, and thank you very much on behalf of my Secretary General, Mohamed Mesghani, for the invitation. It's a great pleasure for UITP to be here. It's great to be physically and meeting people, actually. That's the first great thing, but also to be moving forward and in our cooperation with UIC. And it's an opportunity to repeat that we are really committed to this cooperation and to the development of rail. As far as UITP is concerned, because that's why we focus on the development of urban and regional passenger rail, which are the areas we're focusing on. So the session is focusing on digital game changers, and I think as the other contributors have been thinking about how to address this, and I've decided, and I hope it will complement well the rest, to focus on the customer, so on the service part of what you're saying, which ties up, I think, with the objective of doubling modal shift that you mentioned before, Mr. Borghini, which is an opportunity for me to remind everyone that 10 years ago, UITP set the objectives of doubling the modal share of road transport. Now, this is very nice, but the truth is today, we're probably at a time high in terms of road traffic. So when and we know why, because of the pandemic. But when we talk about our objective, when we talk about our systems, and when we talk about bringing people to our services, I think we have to first bring them back, bring our customers, and think about how we are addressing them. And that's what I propose to talk about. Before I do that, I want to say we are also working on operations. We are also working on financing of rail. We've been committed to that during the whole year, and we did that in our campaign Keep It Rail, which was also tying with the European Year of Rail. And I invite you to see more. And that was to say that UITP is more than what I'm going to talk about. And for these other parts, and we are cooperating with Shift to Rail. We are in some projects through some of my colleagues. So this is important. But the main concern of our members today is this one. We are seeing the emergence of a different mobility at the urban and regional level. I will focus on this, triggered by social evolutions. Maybe that's a destructive, that's a creative destruction. Well, it's definitely the destruction. And that's a pandemic, first of all, mainly. And the way the mobility is evolving is defined or enabled by the digital transformation, by the digital society. So we have the pandemic, and the way we're reacting to it is definitely defined by the digital tools, services we have at our hands. And that has meant more home working. That is meaning more e-commerce. This means change in land and space use in cities. Nothing new, but a big acceleration of all these trends. And we're seeing now, more than 16, 18 months down the road, that some of this is here to stay. How much is debatable, but clearly some of the impact is here to stay. And that starts to show in the data we collect on the evolution of the ridership on the urban and regional transport. It's difficult to say how much, because we thought we were in a transition. I think it's still unstable. We don't really know where we are. But we do see that maybe if we have more working, if some city centers are losing some residents, of course, there is a big premise here, which is every city is different, every country is different, every region of the world is different. So it's very difficult to see common patterns. But there may be less urban trips. There may be shorter trips. The 15-minute cities is also enabled by home working, for the best and the worst, by the way, because it raises questions of social inclusion. More leisure trips. Today, we see in many cities, not all, across in many places in the world, that weekend trips are recovering much faster than what used to be commuter trips. Again, not everywhere, but in many cities. That trips around cities and the periphery, suburbs to suburbs, are recovering faster then trips to the center. What does that mean? How much did it raise? And we see difference between modes, by the way, bus, trams, metros, and that's a bit difficult to interpret, to be honest, and it's a little bit too soon. We see greater differences between age group, which means greater differences in mobility patterns between age groups. The young, the 25, 35, the 30, 50, which are maybe the most affluent, the family, the elderlies. There are different patterns emerging, different lengths and mobility habits emerging, impacted by the pandemic and the digital tools. And that, of course, triggers different use of the urban infrastructure. So my first point is the travel behavior, basically, is the travel patterns are changing. Now we need to look at the travel behavior. And our hypothesis, I think we've had for many years, is that if we make intermodal trip as smooth as possible, if we create seamless mobility, we will trigger modal shift. First of all, we know it's not enough. This is one thing. Without the right regulatory framework, without the stick, sorry to say that, but without the right fiscal incentives, this will not be enough. In our original picture we did at UITP, which is in our mass report, there's no question mark there. It's written mass. I took out the mass, mobility as a service, and I put a question mark. And my point here is if we have to focus on the customer and what is really important in his experience. And I just want to provoke and say, maybe we've been focusing too much on building the beautiful system, but which requires a lot of intermediation to bring the customers, versus leveraging the technology to make effectively the trip more seamless. What does that mean? I think someone Mr. Kern mentioned before. Easy payment. On purpose, I'm not using any fancy words behind payment because we know there are various ways, but easy payments, easy recognizable payment, easy access to travel information, and already leveraging all what that allows in terms of data, personalized information, easy experience, is probably bringing a lot of benefits we need to keep working on. How easy is it to buy a ticket, whether it's a train ticket or a metro ticket? I mean, let's think, we're all transport professionals. How many of us have had troubles buying tickets in the last year? I leave that to you. So we really need to address this. If we can't do it, there's no way the people who are not experts can do it properly. And that builds up to mass. Of course, we heard about Austria. Austria was said 70% of purchase online. Maybe that's one way forward. Australia is also very advanced to build mass, but it has built several blocks down the road. And I think we need to make a strong effort on leveraging this, starting from the customer experience. Sometimes quick and dirty work. I'm not advocating that, by the way, but what I'm saying is that leveraging what can be simple for them. So we have the travel patterns, we have the travel behaviors, and all of this is enabled by technology. And all this, by the way, has to be thought through to address the challenges on the evolution of travel patterns. Again, it's about getting back people on the trains, and it's getting new people on the trains while the trend is not there right now in many places. My last point is, it's about the travel experience from a customer perspective. In UITP, we've run, and we're about to, toward the end, the campaign Mobility for Life. And the message of Mobility for Life is mobility is bringing life back in the cities. Mobility is bringing economic life. It's bringing cultural life after the lockdowns, after the challenges we have. We need to go one step further in the future. It's mobility as a lifestyle. How can we leverage the technology, the digital transformation, with the game changer, which is the hyperconnectivity at the end of the day, and the evolution of the city, described before, to transform the mobility experience with the lifestyle. So that mobility is more than mobility. It's part of the life. It's not a parenthesis between A and B. It's a continuum. So it's where you shop. It's where you maybe you work. And I'm talking still about public transport. Some of those things become more obvious, of course, with long distance. And that should trigger us about thinking the services, the stations, We talk about stations, we need to accelerate that to provide the access experience that you can, we have the demonstration, we have the pilots, we all have good examples in mind. It's about rolling that to a larger scale so that the multimodal sustainable urban transport experience is part of the lifestyle and is enjoyable. So it's not exactly a UITP official position I'm giving you here, but this one you can find it on the website. And we don't have one on digital campus changers, but I thought I was going to give you a few hints of what is actually being discussed by our members at the moment as a reaction to what has been happening over the last 18 months. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Sylvain. And thank you for bringing that to a close and for the thoughts that you have shared with us. It's now my pleasure to pass on to Dr. Florian Brummer, who is head of Europe, Middle East and Africa in the Amazon Web. And I won't read the rest of his title because it's very long. I'll let him get on with it. And if you want to call up your slides, please remember to ask the organizers to push the slides on. Over to you, Florian.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Anson, for having me, and excited to be on this panel. It continues to be unprecedented times. I have to admit, I was very much looking forward to my rail trip to Paris and seeing many of you in person today, but let's make this exciting and the best of it anyways. So I have a couple of slides. I assume they're showing, and let me jump right in. When we as Amazon Web Services, AWS, talk to our rail customers at the moment, I think it's 3 core topics that keep being on everybody's mind, and they will stay around for the next years. One is, and Sylvain has just made that case very powerfully, how to win back customers after COVID. I think there are high ambitions to double and even more than double rail usage. At the same time, according to 2020 Capgemini study, there is strong desire driven by COVID, obviously, for individual mobility. So more than 76% of people perceived public transportation as unsafe, and building back trust, building new services, increasing interconnectivity and intermodal will grow in importance to customers. The second one, again, has been mentioned and is, of course, sustainability. It has been one of the core topics of the past months and years. Rail plays a crucial role in fighting climate change, whether this is the European Green Deal or several countries' battles against climate change individually. Moving freight volumes and passengers to rail is a significant ecosystem undertaking, and the ambitions are big here, as we heard earlier. Finally, and again, COVID is driving that, obviously, is a focus on the cost front. So UIC estimated in 2020 that passengers and freight revenues could take a 78 to 125 billion hit in 2020-21. And it seems, quite frankly, that we're still not out of the woods in that space. So how can technology, and more specifically, cloud computing, help here? And if you could move to the next slide. Let me take a step back maybe and review where cloud computing really comes in here. The term cloud computing refers to the on-demand delivery of IT resources via the internet with a pay-as-you-go pricing. So instead of buying, owning, maintaining your own data centers and servers, organizations can acquire technologies such as compute power, storage, databases, AI, ML services on a as-needed basis. And it's similar to how a consumer flips a switch to turn on the light in their home, and the power company providing electricity. With cloud computing, AWS manages and maintains the technology infrastructure in a secure environment, and businesses access these resources via the internet to develop and run their applications. So capacity can grow and shrink instantly, and businesses only pay for what they use. So if you could move to the next slide. Just checking, one more and one more. Yeah, one more. So how do our customers really leverage the value of the cloud? There are really 4 pillars. One is cost savings. When it comes to traditional data centers, capacity planning is typically a real major challenge. It requires accurately predicting technology needs, and procuring equipment typically takes 6 to 9 months before it's operational. With the cloud, organizations pay for what they need, and during periods of low usage, there's fewer resources available. During periods of peak demand, the system scales and deliver those required performances. The second aspect of translating cloud into business value is staff productivity. So in a data center world, employees spend a lot of time doing work that doesn't really differentiate the business. For example, previously a significant proportion of staff might have been dedicated to procuring, setting up, maintaining physical hardware infrastructure, physical servers. With the cloud, all of that moves and is no longer necessary for the individual or organization. They can move to day-to-day operational headaches rather than IT spend. The third one is really operational resiliency. So unplanned outages due to security breaches. I think Mr. Kern mentioned that earlier on as one of the key topics as well. Hardware failure, software glitches. Quite frankly, human error can be very expensive. And cloud computing helps here again through redundant availability zones, automating human error-prone processes, high levels of security, and reducing the likelihood of software outages. And the last aspect of really translating cloud computing into business value is the ability to increase agility and innovate faster. With the cloud, developers can instantly provision resources, begin writing code, experiment, fail fast. This enables rapid reactions to customer needs. And they can avoid the cost because they can shut down their instances and their deliveries if it's no longer needed. So if you could go to the next slide, let me translate that really briefly and being conscious of time into the operations and how technology can now and going forward really help rail customers, what we see in the industry. Christian Kern has mentioned a couple of them, other colleagues as well. One is for sure the topic of predictive and preventive maintenance. That's a topic driven very much by the ingestion and making sense of large amounts of data. So Spanish CAF, for example, built a lead mine platform utilizing Internet of Things, IoT technology to deliver predictive maintenance using captured by sensors on trains in real time. This is something that truly monitors and leverages the capability of cloud computing to both ingest data volumes, high amount of data volumes, and then make sense of that in real time, whether that's air conditioning or effectiveness of braking systems. A second aspect is data as an enabler. I think it's been mentioned before as well. Usually railways don't struggle with having too little data. It's really making sense out of it. So for example, SNCF Réseau is leveraging AWS to run their data and computer vision modelings that are designed to identify malfunctions and problems on rail lines. So the reduced AI/ML deployment time from months to weeks really makes a difference here. I think another really exciting example is Siemens leveraging, for example, data platforms on AWS that touch then in deploying services within minutes rather than hours. There's micro-mobility players like TIER leveraging the cloud to operate their fleets at the core. And lastly, and let me close with that again, on sustainability. A new report of 451 Research finds that computing in the cloud is actually 5 times more energy efficient than on-premise data centers in a typical EU enterprise infrastructure. So companies in Europe can reduce their energy use by almost 80% by moving their compute workloads out of on-premise data centers to cloud solutions. And I think it's extremely exciting times, obviously, that kind of opportunity of combining physical rail with cloud computing abilities that we see ahead of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and congratulations on bringing this session round with 2 or 3 minutes to go. So we've just got time for one more question. And as you're on the screen, I'll put it to you, Florian. that you're encouraging the rail sector to move towards cloud-based data storage and analysis. How assured, or what does the industry need to do to assure itself of absolute continuity of delivery, so that discontinuities don't impact on service performance?
Yeah, I think that there's multiple components to that, right? One is really, I think, the ability to operate in environments that actually have limited connectivity to the cloud, potentially. And for example, there's, and this I think has been mentioned before a bit as well, that kind of concept of combining pure cloud with edge computing abilities, right? So there is that link to the physical world. Obviously, if you're entering zones of limited capabilities, and then really combining that into almost a hybrid setup is crucial. I think the second one is the true resiliency of the cloud itself. So security is job zero. Let's make no mistake, right? So security is job zero. AWS supports that with significant investment, high levels of security, and a foundation for building compliance-ready applications and services to our customers. We have a shared responsibility model in place. And at the same time, then there's redundancies and resiliencies in setting up multiple availability zones, for example, that are then resilient to natural disasters, power outages, etc., that just will enable that kind of continuity.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, we've come to the end of the 50 minutes allocated to the topic of data and how it's going to transform us over the next 5 years. So I'd like to ask you all to join me in thanking our speakers, who were Christian Kern, Silvio Borghini, Sylvain Haon, and Florian Brumer. So thank you very much indeed to all of our speakers. I'll now hand over to, I think, Simon, who will...
Yeah, thank you, Anson. Thank you very much indeed. Always a complicated situation trying to juggle all of that with online and a physical presence here. But what I'm going to do now is move us straight on to into our next session on this particular topic of this transition to clean mobility, and the session related to modal shift strategy, and introduce Sandra Gehenot, who is our freight director here at UIC, who is going to be the moderator for this particular session, and will no doubt have great delight in introducing her panel to you all. Sandra, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Simon. Good morning from my side to all of you. Thanks to the panelists who are coming on stage. So before we start, I think we've heard a lot of information this morning, a lot of concepts and messages passed on by the numerous speakers. I mean, Mr. Maminsky was advocating moving from vision to implementation. We heard about sector collaboration. We heard about how to make everything more attractive and efficient. Mr. Borghini was talking about rethinking rail and being disruptive. So maybe without any further ado, I would like to welcome the panelists who are here on stage, and thanks for joining. We have a panel of gentlemen. So Mr. Philippe Citroën, Mr. Kauppila here with us, and then online we have Mr. Hegge and Mr. Ampomah, and you can see all this on the screen. Talking about being disruptive, let's change title a little bit to keep you waiting until lunch. And allow me to ask, but maybe I'll come closer actually, allow me to ask and to start with one question, because what we've heard this morning, it's about a lot of concept, but what we have to address now is how we actually do this modal shift. We had concepts, we had enablers, but how do we actually do it? But first of all, allow me to ask you, what is exactly modal shift for you? Mr. Citroën, maybe.
Well, I had prepared some slides, so maybe later on I could show the slide. First of all, it's important for the people to know what is Unife. Unife represents the European Rail Supply Industry Association. So it's good for you to know that I will take the views of the rail manufacturers on this topic. But modal shift, I think we can be quite happy because I see that there are representatives of the Commission here, and there was a speech from Mr. Goetz a few minutes ago. Modal shift is of course what we see in the Green Deal, and with those objectives of doubling the freight share and the passenger share before 2050. That's the most important thing that has to be done. It is true that in the past there was some pressure to go on this modal shift, but what we see is that today there is a real momentum to push in the direction of rail. We have the COP26. Maybe there was a bit of disappointment because rail was not at the heart of the discussion, but it's true that as the rail CO2 emission is so low, it's close to 0.5%. We still have to make an effort in terms of organization, but we also need, if you want to have a real modal shift, to have the funding which goes with it. And it's interesting to be here in UIC because later on maybe I could say a few things which are quite positive if you look at what's happening in Europe, because on the national recovery plans you have almost 55 billion euros going to rail. Out of those 55 billion euros, there will be 20 for Italy. And I congratulate all our Italian counterparts for the excellent lobbying they made. But still, you have to add to these the structural funds, Connecting Europe facility. So we are today in a very positive period. And the most important thing is that if you want to have a modal shift, you need to have a kind of a good organization. Yesterday, I would say to Kira, I was in Spain. I met some people, and they were telling me, we have money, but we don't know how to spend the money. And that is terrible when you hear this kind of thing, because you have people who say that the tendering process is today, as not for some projects already started. And as we are on the again, on another wave of the pandemic, have to be careful, because this is a fantastic opportunity that we have with money with a good investment to increase the modal shift. And you know that I'm sorry to say that, but it's a good opportunity because we have the operators in front of us, that the national recovery plans goes from now until 2026. I think it's tomorrow. So things have to be prepared. And we have a lot of opportunity. And when we listen to what Carlo said a few minutes ago about the 1.2 billion which will go on Europe's rail, which has been officially approved today, you have a lot of opportunity to change the system and to have a system where we will get again back the passenger on the trains and the freight on the train, because this is part of the problem that we have, that the market share continues to be very low. Not here. The last thing I wanted to say, as we are here in this international forum, is that it would be very interesting, because we had the opportunity during those 2 days to listen to all the representatives of the rail sector working all over the world, is to know more about what's happening on their national recovery plans. We know that in the US, there's this bipartisan infrastructure law which has been voted. It will be very interesting to know more, because of course, for Unife, we are not only working in Europe, we are working on a worldwide basis. And we have, with the budget that has been adopted all over the world, there is certainly a very good opportunity to increase the modal shift.
Thank you very much, Mr. Citroën. Indeed, you are Director General of Unife, the European Rail Supply Industry Association. Sorry, do I need to get closer to them? Okay, so we're playing musical chairs. Sorry, it wasn't foreseen, but here we go. So so thank you very much. So indeed, so I mean, your key messages, I think in your presentation, we didn't see the slides, were very much, so we need the framework, we have the framework. This is what you're saying. We need incentives. We need incentives and And I think this was an important message as well, that we need young talents, young brains, because it's about the future generation, and it is the future generation which will help implementing all that and moving in this direction.
Just one thing on talent. So there is a European program called Staffers, and I know that some people are working on it. It's also very interesting to see that operators and the rail supply industry are working together on this issue of talents, because now we need to find the engineers.
Exactly. Exactly. So it's not just about enabling technologies, but it's about people behind those as well. So thank you very much. So maybe we will move to the next speaker, Mr. Paul Hegge. He is remote. He is sitting in Brussels or Belgium anyway. So Mr. Hegge is the Director of Public Affairs of Lineas. He's a prominent, if he allows me to say that, but I'm a bit biased, of course, he's a prominent member of the Rail Freight Forward Coalition, and its Belgian offspring, one of the founders, of which the motto, as we know, is mental shift for modal shift. So Mr. Hegge, welcome. And in your view, what is needed to enable modal shift, and what are you as Lineas, as a company, as a freight operator, actually doing in order to promote this? Welcome.
Thanks a lot, Sandra, and thanks for having me on this panel. And congratulations to UICs for its 100th anniversary. When we talk about modal shift, I think what we're talking about is a common objective of all the stakeholders in the railway business, and that common objective should be to make sure that running a train is as easy as running a truck in Europe. Now, that's just a slogan, very easy to say, but very difficult to put into practice. And as far as Lineas is concerned, actually modal shift has come the goal, the mission of the company. It's our raison d'etre to be active in this economic transport area. And I think if we look at what all the stakeholders need to do in order to realize a modal shift, it means that we as RUs need to innovate an awful lot. We need to come up with new products, new services, taking on more commercial risk than that we have done so far in order to come to products that are comparable to the road. Secondly, again, to be more comparable to the road, we need to become more flexible. This means actually making sure that we have more frequency in our offers, which also means that if we want to create more frequency, we probably need to work more together with other railway operators, a little bit like in the aviation business, where you also have alliances and sharing capacity. We probably have to move towards that as well in order to increase the frequency of our services, and by doing that, matching the flexibility that trucks can offer. And but not least is the innovation, the pure innovation in terms of technology. We need to increase our productivity, lower our cost as a railway company. And the three main technologies that we want to stress over the next 10 years, not just Lineas, but all the railway operators within Europe, is to really focus on the investments in digital automatic coupling, in digital platforms, and in ETCS onboard units, ultimately leading also to ATO, which François Daven mentioned earlier today. That's what railway undertakings need to do from their side. But even if they would succeed in doing all this, that won't do. It won't be enough. Our other stakeholder, our other biggest stakeholder, are actually the infrastructure managers. And there we really, trying to push them into, I would say, the next mission, or a new mission for infrastructure managers. So far, in most countries, infrastructure managers have just been managing infrastructure. We don't believe that's enough in the 21st century. We believe that managing the infrastructure is only the first condition, the first role of an infrastructure manager. But the real mission in the 21st century is to maximize the flows of goods and people on the network. The network itself is not the objective. The objective is to maximize the flows on the network. And the only real actor who can facilitate that as a neutral partner is the infrastructure manager. And so we are expecting much more of a logistical approach towards infrastructure rather than only an engineering approach to the infrastructure. Having said that, it means in the first place, we need to make sure that the infrastructure is, of course, safe and sound and that there is enough capacity. That's for sure. That also means creating a big reliability in the capacity that is available. Nowadays, for instance, we are suffering an awful lot. The past few days, the rural area has almost become impossible to reach from the Netherlands, from Belgium, and the other way around. It has almost come to a standstill last Friday because of the lack of reliability, because of the lack of maintenance, and an awful lot of TCRs combined with incidents. These kind of situations are not tolerable, are not possible if we want to be one of the future modes of transport, because we have become totally unreliable for many of our major clients. That's, of course, is the first thing that the infrastructure manager do, making sure that the system is reliable and that there's enough capacity available. That also means increasing the capacity in hardware infrastructure when we talk about P400, for instance, or when we talk about the facility to have longer trains running in Europe up to 740 meters by 2030. But it also means not just looking at hard infrastructure investment, but particularly looking at what can be done in terms of software, because software is something where we as a sector have always been a little bit more reluctant somehow to look at. We always look at the hard infrastructure. What can we do in terms of software in order to increase capacity and in order to enhance the management of the flows on the network? And there we can do enormous amounts. We can make enormous amounts of progress by installing, for instance, digital capacity management tools, and by also working together more among all the stakeholders in digital platforms. So a real plea for investing much more in these technologies, which are much less costly and actually have the potential to increase capacity much quicker than through hard infrastructure. The third thing is we have Unife on board here. I think railway operators also looking for an even more dynamic supply industry, where there's ecosystems also of smaller companies working together with bigger companies to integrate innovation much faster, and also looking particularly at software inclusion into the new products of hardware that are made usually by the bigger companies. We need to get a more dynamic supply industry if we want to compete with the, for instance, the road transport industry. Fourth, but not extremely important as well, are governments. And I've heard today from Chief of Cabinet of Valiant saying that Europe has done enough in terms of legislation. Maybe that's true, but allow me to say that governments haven't done enough yet. The fact that we're talking about modal shift actually means that there has been market failure over the past decades. We always pride ourselves of having a good economic system with the market regulating everything. Well, the market has led us astray because we have been making all the wrong choices by companies, by families and so on, by not using the different transport modes in their most efficient way. We have given much more advantages to the road sector in general, which we are paying a big price for. So governments have to make sure there's more of a level playing field so that each transport mode can really play its role. That means internalizing external costs. That means getting to some, emissions trading schemes or whatever. But as long as this is not in place, governments will have to take measures in order to create modal shift. For us, that means supporting certain railway products because they cannot be done if there is no government support, or secondly, helping the road transport sector in transforming to become a multimodal sector, help them invest in multimodal equipment and support multimodal products that they may put in place. As far as legislation is concerned, I think probably most is in place, but what we are still missing is deployment and enforcement. I just look how, the efforts that it takes to implement ERTMS and the cost it creates for each and every operator, it's mind-boggling. Secondly, We've had the TSI on silent brakes, was supposed to take place 2 years from now. Some countries forced it to be in place much sooner. And then now other countries are putting restrictions on those companies that have actually implemented this TSI already right now. This is simply not a European transport mode market. You cannot imagine if this would happen in the road transport sector. So we have a problem of deployment and enforcement still, and there I think we need much more strong government interventions, and we also need stronger regulators to make sure that there is a healthy competition between the different rail operators in order to avoid also misuse of state aid. So that's, for me, the main things that need to happen by all the stakeholders. It is a group effort. It is not just one party who can solve the problem and realize the European and the Belgians' ambitions in terms of modal shift and climate objectives. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul. So if these are the main... So the main objectives, but a really dense program of homework for the railway undertakings. So a new mission, a mental shift for infrastructure managers, but we will give the floor to an infrastructure manager soon, relying on technology and also on an adequate context, which is also what Mr. Citroën addressed. And actually our panel today, in a way, represents those four key areas which you are talking about, and also deployment. So maybe let's park some of these concepts and come back to them a bit later in a panel discussion. But now I would like maybe to give the floor to Mr. Ampomah, who is CTO of Network Rail, the infrastructure manager in the UK. Mr. Ampomah, hello, good morning, and thanks for joining. So with this, passionate debates and comments and statements made so far, from what we've heard, what do you think an infrastructure manager can do or needs to do to encourage a modal shift to rail? And what solutions can an infrastructure manager bring?
Thank you very much for the invitation, and once again, congratulations to UIC on its 100th anniversary. Very, very pleased to be invited to this event. So thank you for the question. I see as an infrastructure manager, there's three key things which Paul has picked up on already, and I'll expand a little bit on those. So I think the three things for me are cost efficiency. There's also demand, so there's commercial demand and investment, and then competitiveness. So those three things are very key in terms of developing and creating the infrastructure capability that will meet those requirements. If we look at I suppose, and it's something I'm very keen that we don't, as an industry, a rail industry, lose sight of and lose the energy that we've seen. The pandemic, unfortunately, has thrown some real challenges towards us, but the reactiveness and the ability that we've made to actually shift things to rail really quickly, and in areas that we probably dragged our heels on for a number of years, was quite radical. It's quite fundamental in terms of making that shift. And in the Great Britain, we saw a shift of about 7% growth in less than a year, where we're normally about 3 or 4%. So it shows what's the art of the possible when demand's available. But we need to not necessarily just wait for demand. I think we need to push demand. If you see, industries like Apple who don't wait for demand, they actually develop and grow it and pull people along. We need to be slightly flighter foot and think that way moving forward. So from a cost efficiency point of view, I think I look at the infrastructure and look at the demands we have of electrification. We need to get rid of diesel. It's just not a viable solution anymore. And we have some targets, COP26, some key targets that have been agreed on. And as an industry, we need to get ahead of the game and push ourselves faster and get to low carbon, decarb much quicker. Electrification is very costly. It also takes quite a lot of time to install. And I think we ought to look at other solutions. And you know, one of the challenges maybe hydrogen might be the solution. The industry doesn't demand it. The industry may not necessarily be looking that direction, but I think there's an opportunity to look at other scales, other opportunities to develop carbon as a potential solution, whether it's via ammonia cracking or using carbon as the main source of solution. It's certainly something we've got to consider, and using it in that sort of bimodal function will help us to shift freight in a way that we haven't before, to basically take carbon away from, to take freight away from the roads and shift it onto rail. So that's got to be the backbone of what we do for freight. The demand is going to be a real challenge, and Paul mentioned about legislation and about incentives, and I think that's key. I think if we're expecting private investors to move in this space, it's a very complex area to navigate through, and we're asking basically operators to drive the demand. I think we need a bit of help. We need to probably, as an industry and an infrastructure manager, take a lead in pulling freight companies and operators in, actually driving the low carbon solution, and also driving customers. And let's remember, customers now are thinking very green. So that, you know, as the road network begins to get greener, they will be looking at alternatives. And if rail doesn't offer those options, they'll move to rail. So we've got that real competitiveness that we need to challenge ourselves on, and move more and more towards lower carbon freight to meet the demands of our customers. We've also got the competitiveness within freight, which is the third thing. The demand for longer freight, heavier freight potentially, but also capacity. We've got to, you know, there's a lot of work going in the ERTMS in terms of developing that and installing it and actually implementing it to give us those capacity opportunities. Some of that will be delivered through better data, better decision making through data, but for us to actually lead that direction and drag that competitiveness of rail, the way we need to do that is to actually implement some of these solutions and implement them quickly. There is a challenge around faster freight as well. As an infrastructure manager, we'll have to look at a multitude of improvements to the infrastructure in order to cope with that. But it shouldn't be a driver to stop us doing those things. I think where we need to really focus on is how we can do some of those things at pace, and challenge some of our standards to identify opportunities to actually bring that mix of passenger and freight demand onto our networks, meet the capacity challenges, and also meet the speed challenges. So those are the three things I think we need to challenge ourselves on. We need to do it at pace, and we need to probably investigate the art of the possible. So don't leave any stone unturned. Let's look at alternatives to power propulsion, which I think will give us some of the advantage we need, probably a lot faster than purely just focus on electrification expansion everywhere, which is important, but it's not the only thing.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Actually, two very interesting discussion, and thank you, Mr. Ampomah. I mean, you started with really the willingness showing the willingness from an infrastructure manager to, focusing on freight and to use enabling technologies to support that. On the other hand, we also heard a very emotional appeal from an operator who is day in, day out in the freight business, facing temporary capacity restrictions, TCR for those, for the acronym. So it's a mix of both. I mean, looking forward in innovation and technology, enabling technologies, but also implementing connectivity, which that was very much the message. And maybe if we go back 2 minutes to Mr. Hegge, listening to all this, and you are an operator working day in, day out in the business. If you had one Santa wish to ask an operator, an infrastructure manager today, what would that be? You know, what would be, in your view, the thing to ask to actually produce the business benefit that we're looking for within the timeline that we are looking for, as freight is, of course, by nature international. So what would that be?
Well, to us, it would be mental shift, and some infrastructure managers are making that mental shift. It is changing a little bit the logic from an engineering point of view towards a client-oriented view. To give you an example, planning of works is usually done from an engineering point of view, and that's truly understandable. But if you look at maximizing the traffic on your network, you should first see what is the effect going to be of these works on my clients, and how can we work with the clients? What kind of solution can we propose? And then you start planning the work. So it's sort of, you know, turning the logic around, which is a major shift, and which not make them easier. We understand that fully, but that would be an enormous gain for everybody if everybody would have that kind of a mental shift in his head and in his way of working. It also means that many people that are working currently in infrastructure manager don't have those skills, or they've never been trained for that. And we probably need also other people at the top level of infrastructure managers with a logistical point of view and with a logistical background, actually. I mean, historically, there's never been asked of infrastructure managers, so we're really pushing them to think in terms of the 21st century, particularly for freight. You know, we have planning process up to 2 years. Well, go out in the market and ask a company if they can provide you with the data of what they will be transporting 2 years from now, and how many times and up to what volumes. That's no longer part of the 21st century. So we really need to become much more flexible and much more fluid. Otherwise, our clients will not follow.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hegge. I can see Mr. Ampomah was actually nodding as well. So alignment of thoughts and approach here, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes. Yes, definitely, and I totally agree. I think the first start of all this is looking at the problem statement. What problem are we actually trying to solve for our customers? We need to look at the customer from a customer's perspective, because we could design an engineering solution that actually doesn't meet their demand, and it will never be used, and we'll not get the benefit or the value out of it. So we need to understand that and develop the proper business case which meets the customer needs. And I absolutely agree that if you look at where we were literally 3, 4, 5 years ago, coal was rail freight via coal movements was a big part of industry. That has absolutely dwindled, and we need to be a bit more progressive and look ahead to see what's the next future demand for freight. Where is that coming from? Is it going to be battery movements, battery power? Is it, we need to actually understand that and pitch ourselves in that space so we can understand how we meet that demand, not wait for it to happen, but actually meet those demands. And we can only do that by working with our freight customers.
Yeah, thank you very much. So truly systems approach. Mr. Citroën, please.
I just wanted to add something, because I hear a lot of things, but I personally think that the deployment of RTMS is absolutely essential in Europe for freight and for everything, because if you don't have an interoperable system, nothing will work. And we saw that all the efforts which have been made during the Connecting Europe Express, and we saw that there are still so many problems at the borders that have to be solved. If you don't solve these kind of problems, then you will be in a situation where the model ship will be certainly difficult, and the money will be there if you want to deploy RTMS. I just wanted to add this specific thing.
No, thank you very much. Unfortunately, we don't have too much time, but I know you are hitting a soft spot of Mr. Hegge. You know, this is one of his other, but we will keep it to that, so maybe have another session at another time. Otherwise, I'm taking away the time from Mr. Kauppila, who's here as well, representing he's the head of the Secretary General's office at ITF, the International Transport Forum. And Mr. Kauppila, you've heard all this, and we started with Mr. Citroën mentioning about the context. We heard it before as well. You know, it relies on several aspects. So from your point of view, what are the policy orientations that would help promote modal shift rail, of course, from our perspective, no, but in a holistic way, please.
Thank you very much.
And you have some slides which you can manage. Yeah, thanks.
Yes, thank you very much. Sandra, this is working? Yep. Thank you very much, and I'm really delighted to be here at the symposium organized, and very much thank you for the invitation for our key partner UIC with the International Transport Forum. Can I pick up on your first question first? So you asked, what is the modal
Yes,
shift?
I know, there was a little glitch, but nobody saw, so please, yes,
I'd like
please
to
do.
answer that, because I think, technically speaking, what for me modal shift is an individual change or behavioral change resulting from the fact that you have a comparative advantage over one mode over another in terms of cost, time, reliability, etc. However, this individual choice may not be optimal from the societal perspective, from the sustainability perspective, because incentives, and specifically the policies that we talked about as well, are not accounting for externalities. And I think this is where our role and the work we do at the International Transport Forum comes in place, to align those policies and incentives. We've heard several speakers here talk about this before. And just to say, modal shift is an effective decarbonization measure, but we might not reach the needed scale for that shift alone. So interoperability, multimodality becomes also an important factor. But let me just start with this first slide here. We project in our transport outlook that global transport demand will triple by 2050. What does it mean in terms of decarbonization? The CO2 emissions from transport will grow by 16% by 2050, even with all the current ambitions and policies in place. So let me be very clear, we're not going to reach our climate goals with the policies we have in place today. We need much more ambitious policies, which will have a lot to do with the rail sector as well, where railways can play a crucial role in the decarbonizing of the transportation sector in our Reshape Plus scenario, which really is an ambitious policy scenario, which not only is an increase in ambition, but it also takes into account some of the hard to see sort of positive impacts of the behavioral impacts of the pandemic, and also the stimulus packages we'll see coming up after pandemic, and recovery packages that would be much more directed towards sustainable transport mode. So there's an opportunity. But I think our colleague from SNCF earlier mentioned targets. We looked at all the national contributions to climate discussions, and only 16% of those have targets for transport. So there's a definitely need to set much more ambitious targets as well. Now, what is included in our decarbonizing the ambitious package, especially for railways? First of all, it's about infrastructure. I won't need to go through, you're the experts on this topic, but really give the flavor of what we believe that are the directions where we need to go in order to achieve a higher share, that doubling of rail share, and also decarbonizing the whole transport sector. We need to develop further, expand urban railway systems, increasing their capacity, safety, level of service, high-speed rail networks. This is the only option for hard-to-abate aviation sector. And this is where Fit for 55 and all the ambitions that are putting forward are crucial to reduce CO2 emissions from aviation side, for example. On the freight side, freight rail side, it's the freight high-throughput corridors, rail links, investing on those, sustainable alternative shipping alternatives, and multimodal terminals and connections. But it's not only about the infrastructure, it's about technology. We heard excellent speakers from the last session talking about technology, integrated ticketing systems. I think the number here in Paris was, since the introduction of integrated ticketing system, the public transport has grown, demand has grown 30% in over the 18 years. These are just small examples. Electrification, railways is one of the most electrified mode of transport, is the most electrified mode of transport already, needs to continue to be able to even further help the comparative advantage of the rail sector over the others. Intelligent transport systems, we heard a lot about these, integrated border crossings, maximizing capacity, utilization factors, reliability, modernization of rolling stocks. But my final point, because I'm rushing through, knowing the lunch is waiting there, and I'm the only person between you and the lunch. So one of the key things for me at the end of the day is pricing, and it's the economic instruments. As long as we don't price the carbon correctly, we will not have that behavioral change I said in the beginning, what is sort of the crucial for the modal shift, or the change in the minds of the companies who make those decisions. So we do need to revise the pricing schemes, congestion charging, parking fees, taxation, vehicle registration, fuel, etc., etc. Higher costs on carbon, higher costs on externalities, and that is the way to go forward and incentivize that modal shift. But there's also other incentives. In addition to taxation, subsidies for new financing instruments are available. Land value capture, green bonds, public-private partnership, these are all available and possible that can help us then to support those infrastructure investments and the technology adoptions I was speaking earlier. And finally, market liberalization needs to be encouraged and continue to make sure that we are innovative and increase the network efficiency across the place. And I'll stop my slides there and just to say that I think we know the tools. There's a lot policies that are in place that need to be just acted upon, and that's needed in order to decarbonize the transport.
Thank you very much. Maybe one last question to the two panelists here, and after that I will really stop. So if we meet again next year, same place, same time, what difference do you expect to see? What would you want?
I would be happy if, first of all, I think that Europe Trail should start at the beginning of for 2022. So I hope there will be some first results. I think also as well that it would be good if we could progress on the issue of battery and hydrogen trains. I think that's important because by 2050 there will be 70,000 kilometers of rail which will not be electrified from what we saw in some specific study. So I think a lot of things can really start, and then we have all the work done by UIC on the 5G, FRMCS. Those are the kind of things that can really change the landscape where we are. And just a last thing on PPP, you spoke about this public-private financing scheme. Europe's Range Undertaking is a PPP. It's co-financed by the industry, the operators and infrastructure manager and the EU, so that's already a lot of things can be done. And I saw the information on green bonds. I think that the fact that the European Investment Bank is becoming the climate bank is also things that we can consider as very positive. So if the pressure is there, there's a momentum. I think a lot of things can happen in the next month, positive things on the next month.
So momentum is the key, Mr. Kauppila, and then we close. What's on your wish list for next year when we meet?
I think coming back from COP a couple of weeks ago as well from Glasgow, I think the key in the wish list is not just talk about ambition, but move from ambition to action. And this is really the implementation is needed.
So thank you very much. Thank you to
Sandra, if I may.
Oh, sorry, Paul.
Just one comment. If I look at the program, it's an amazing and great program over these 2 days. But I've been looking with a microscope to see or to find our final clients. And I haven't seen any testimonial by a passenger or by a company using railways for freight. So I would hope, maybe not next year, but a few years from now, to have testimonials by our customers saying that our future is railway, not the highway. That would be my wish.
Okay, we count on you for that. Thank you, Mr. Ampomah. Is thumbs up from your side as well?
Yes, okay. Thumbs up from I totally agree. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, with this, thank you very much to all the speakers and to all the delegates. I think it's over to lunch or over to Simon first. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Sandra. Thank you very much indeed to all the panelists there. And indeed, just to pick up on Paul's point there about passengers, or customers anyway, we had hoped to have the European Passenger Federation here at the event, but unfortunately they were unable to attend at the last minute. But that's unfortunately the way these things are at this moment in time. Ladies and gentlemen, you'll be delighted to know that we are, wow, Sandra, who said the freight sector can't deliver on time? You are absolutely spot on time. Yes. So the freight sector has recovered all of the delay from this morning. It's called management by just in time, but we got there. Thank you very much indeed. I think you've sat there long enough. You had a very short coffee break. Now you can have a full-time lunch break for those of you here in Paris. For those of you online, have a lovely break, whatever you're going to do, whether it's breakfast, lunch or dinner, or just to put your feet up and warm up again. We will reconvene at 12:30 Paris time. Please be precise here in Paris so we can start exactly at 12:30. And the lunch is being served just outside where the coffee was earlier on. Enjoy your break. Thank you.